Episode 7, Suffer the Little Children. Flashback to 2 weeks ago. We see a few deadheads walking up to the ranch. We then see Blake with a machete in his hands, and he sees them coming, and he walks over to the fence. As the deadheads are all growling up against the fence, Blake kills them all with his machete. We then hear someone say, "Hey," as we see Hayley walk up to him, and she says, "How many this morning?" Blake says, "That's 27 of them this morning. That's almost double the amount as yesterday." And Hayley says, "Well, Lincoln and the others are supposed to be back from that hunt by the end of the week, so then we'll have some more help around here." And Blake says, "I'm actually needing to talk to you about something. You mind?" Hayley says, "Sure, but come inside. This weather is terrible." Blake says, "All right, let's go in then." "I'll tell you what, I'm never going to Canada, that's for damn sure." They sit down and Hayley says, "So what's going on?" Blake says, "Well, over the past few weeks, I've been checking some of these other places on the map, and I think we've got some good leads on some more sustainable places that we can live in, permanently." Hayley says, "All right, but why would we leave? We all came here to get as far away from danger as possible." Blake says, "Yeah, I know, but this place is starting to fail. We barely have any food left, and every other day, someone's going out on runs to find food just so we can get by for the next day or two. It's time to face the truth. We need a better place." And Hayley says, "Okay, and we have it, right here. Look, I know it doesn't seem like it now, but this place is more than good enough for us, and we just need a little bit of time. Think about what we have here. We're not running for our lives." Currently, as Hayley's narrating, we see her running through the woods and she looks badly hurt. And now in the current timeline, she's running for her life. We're not afraid of losing each other. As she's yelling, "Blake, we aren't tired." As we see, she's struggling through the woods and she is in rough shape after the fall. But most of all, we don't have to be afraid of people anymore. She's running through the woods trying to find Blake, but we see she's been following some footprints for a while, and eventually she loses them. We see her leg is bleeding from the fall and she's struggling to even walk. She then has to stop and take a break, and we see her laying up against a tree. And we see she finally sits down and she's struggling to stay awake. But after a bit, she passes out. We then see Hayley's been out for a while. We then see two guys dressed in black walk up to her with guns, and one of them says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Ah, look at this. I think we've just found ourselves the person we've been looking for. Take her and put her in the truck. Douglas should see this." Hayley wakes up inside of a dark room. We see she's locked up and we see her leg has been patched up, but it's still bleeding. She looks very weak, and we then see she tries to break free, but one of her hands is cuffed to a pipe. Hayley says, "Hello? Hey, can anyone hear me?" We then hear a voice through a speaker. "Your name?" Hayley doesn't answer, and then they ask again, "What is your name?" Hayley says, "I'm not telling you shit until you open the door." And the voice says, you answer our questions first. And Hayley says, I'm Hayley. Hayley West. And the voice says, where are you from? Hayley says, Washington. I lived there most of my life. The voice says, are you alone? Hayley says, do you see anyone with me? The voice says, answer the question. And Hayley says, yes, I'm alone, I swear. And the voice doesn't answer her. And Hayley says, hey, I'm telling you the truth. It's just me. Hello? Then the door opens. We see 3 guys walk up to her, and the lead guy says, rise and shine, lady. Let me properly introduce myself. I'm Douglas, and you're Mrs. West. Your husband must be worried sick about you. And Hayley says, please, I haven't done anything to you. Bullshit, he says. You murdered a bunch of our friends last night. Oh, what? You think I didn't know that? Some of my men found what was left of our friends back at the plant, and Mr. West is gonna have to pay. Quite dearly, I'm afraid. So the harder you make this, the worse it'll be. Hayley says, what do you want from me? Douglas says, what I want from you? I want to know where you're hiding. Hayley looks scared and says, we were at a ranch. You people took it from us. And Douglas says, so after that, where are we hanging our hats these days? Hayley says, nowhere. We've been on the road. All we've had is each other. Douglas punches her in the face, and we see 2 of the men in the back even look a bit scared of him. And Douglas says, that feel good? Huh? I'll ask you again. Where are the outlaws? Hayley says, I don't know. He punches her again, and Hayley spits out some blood and says, I don't know. And Douglas says, I'm gonna ask you one more time. Where are they? Hayley says, I've been raped, tortured, and had my kids murdered by you people. So go ahead, dickface. Kill me, but I'll warn you, my husband's not far. So if you have anyone stupid enough that gives a damn about you, you may want to say your goodbyes. And Douglas looks like he's about to do something, but then... Okay. Let's try something else then. He starts walking away, and Hayley says, you really gonna kill the pregnant lady? Douglas slowly turns around and says, pregnant, huh? Oh, do you hear this, guys? Oh, this is priceless. Okay, mother of future serial killer. Well, let's try this again later. You sit. Let the blood pour from your leg. Let the clock start ticking a bit. And when I return, if you don't give me what I want, I'm gonna come here and kill you. Okay? Good girl. And we see him and the men walk out of the room, and the door closes, and we see Hayley starting to cry. As tears start to roll down her face, we transition to tears rolling down, now Kezia's face, as we're back with Lincoln's group. Back with Lincoln's group. We zoom out on a reanimated Blake still tied to the tree. Lincoln and the others have found what's left of Blake, and Kezia is crying, and we then see the look of anger on Lincoln's face, and he says, he was with Hayley. And Dave says, God damn it! This bitch can't be far. We can still find her, let's go. Luke stops him and says, no. Last thing we need is for people running off into the woods. The last thing we need is a war on our hands. Lincoln says, we're already at war. We started something last night. There was a price, and we paid it. Roger says we should get back before people start wondering where we are. Lincoln says, I'm not going. Tom says, look, brother, we need to get back before they find us. Lincoln says, and I agree, but I'm not leaving my wife out here. Luke says, Lincoln, with all due respect, this is a bad decision. And Dave steps in and says, no. No, it isn't. Not many of us have much of anything left. And right now, I think Mr. West has made his choice. And Dave looks at everyone and says, Roger, take him back. Let Catherine and the others know what's going on. One of you contact Sydney and tell her to come home immediately. And tell them no one leaves until we get back. Get everyone ready for a fight. Can you do that for me? And Roger says, sure thing, boss. And everyone leaves, and when it's just Lincoln and Dave, we see Lincoln looks on edge, and Dave kills a deadhead and says, all right. He puts the knife back in his sheath and says, let's go find your wife. Back in the Viper City. We see Lindsay, Cade, Delta, Steven, David, and about 8 other people are all gathering around, as Lindsay says, I called you all here because I just got the word about the power plant being assassinated. We see everyone looks pissed, and Lindsay says, the people in here are scared, and frankly, I don't blame them. Now these outlaws, they've killed way more of us than we can handle. And we've only got over 100 good fighters here, if we're lucky. And Steven asks, you thinking about bringing the people from the outpost here to fight? And Lindsay says, yeah, I am. Look, we need the numbers. This Mr. West is going to continue to take down our settlements. And the more time we let this go, the worse it's going to be. And that's why we're going to make a stand. Delta, Steven, you're in charge of bringing every single fighter you can get to the city. Everyone from every outpost is coming here to fight. Delta says, you got it. Lindsay says, everyone else get my sergeants ready. And Lindsay and her sergeants walk out of the meeting room. As Lindsay walks out, she sees Julia. Julia asks, what's the big meeting for, Mom? Lindsay says, oh, just standard protocol, as always. Julia asks, Mom, what's going on? Lindsay says, nothing, honey, nothing. She starts walking away and Julia says, so, who are the outlaws? Lindsay stops in her tracks and looks back at her and says, look, this isn't something I want you worrying about, okay? Julia says, whatever, I gotta go. I said I'd get breakfast with Ryan. He's been rather scared lately adjusting to the new system. And Lindsay says, all right, well, I'll see you tonight, okay? Julia says, okay, Mom. And Lindsay has a smile on her face, and once Julia walks away, Lindsay's smile then leaves her. Back at Kingstonville. Roger and some soldiers are loading up some guns, and then Luke walks in and says, I tried to contact Sydney. I think she's coming back. Holy moly, we've hit the motherload of firearms. And Roger says, yep, the plan had more than enough guns for everyone. Clay said he found a few rocket launchers, grenades, and several firearms. And Luke looks sad and says, and all it took was Blake. And Roger hugs him and says, I know, brother, I know. And Luke looks like he's holding back tears, and Roger says, I'm sorry, man. He was a damn good guy. Hayley told me all about all those families that he took out of the ranch when it was burning. Not many people would have done something like that, especially in this world. And Luke says, I just want to know if Hayley's alive. I just don't know if I can take another person going in the dirt today. And Roger says, no, man. That woman is a force of nature. I know that wherever she is, she's fighting like hell right now. Back with Hayley. We see this huge mansion, We then reveal that that's where Hayley is being held hostage. Doug then walks in and says, "All right, last chance. Where's your group?" Hayley says, "Go to hell." Douglas says, "All right then, suit yourself." And we see two guys untie Hayley and take her by force out of the cell, and they drag her into another room and lock her in. Hayley's in a dark room, but once she turns around to see where she is, we see the walls covered in blood, and we see mostly dead bodies, and a few deadheads are eating the rest of them. Hayley looks horrified as you hear Douglas outside the door says, "These, my dear, are all the victims that pissed me off. I told you. You should have answered my questions." And Hayley looks scared and says, Okay, I'll tell you everything. Just please, let me out of here." Douglas says, "I'm afraid it's too late for that, sweetheart." And Hayley says, "Let me out, please. You won't get the answers you want if I die in here." Douglas looks careless and says, "I'll find someone else who can. Welcome to the club, Hayley." And the dead start walking towards her, and we hear the screaming as Douglas hears the screams from the other side of the door. He has a huge smile on his face and says, "We got the wife. And with a wife, usually the husband's next." Back with Lincoln and Dave. Lincoln and Dave are walking through the woods, and Lincoln says, "You didn't have to come, you know." Dave says, "Nah, Mr. West. You and I have lost people we've cared about. And besides, I know what it's like to lose a wife. It's not something you want to feel." And Lincoln says, "That's why I'm out here. It's because I felt it. 10 months living out there on my own, looking for her, looking for my kids. There were several nights I'd lay awake and I'd ask myself, what's the point? Why am I doing this to myself? Maybe I should just end it. Hell, my family's probably waiting for me on the other side. But if I would have done that, those kids would have never seen their father again. And because I didn't, I met Tom. I found the people that meant the world to me. And there's so very few of them left. I just want to hang on to them for as long as I can. Just like the last part of my family I've got left." And Dave says, "Well, you should also consider the people that we're dealing with here. What they've already been doing to us." And Lincoln says, "I don't know why you're still here, Dave." Dave says, "I'm out here to help. And besides, if I came back without you, your people would start raising hell, and I can't have that." And Lincoln stops walking and says, "And there it is." And Dave says, "What?" Lincoln says, "You were never out here to help me, weren't you?" Dave says, "Partly, yes. But if you think I'm going back there with Tom in charge of your people, you must think I'm crazy." And Lincoln says, "Then why'd you take us in the first place?" Dave says, "Because I know the only way we win is together." And Lincoln says, "So you're using us. Is that what you're doing?" Dave says, "No. I mean, what do you think? I'm just going to slit your throat the second that the queen is dead?" Lincoln walks up to him and says, "Well, I guess you got a choice to make now, don't you?" And Lincoln keeps walking and says, "You coming or what?" And Dave then follows behind him, and they keep moving. Back in the Viper City. Julia is walking the streets, and we see Ryan says, "Hey." Julia says, "Hey, how are you settling in so far?" Ryan says, "Well, I've got asked to join the Viper military. When your mom heard about what I could do out there, me against the dead, and all the experience around them, she wanted me to become a sergeant. So I'm going through with training this afternoon." And Julia says, "What kind of training?" Ryan says, "Don't know yet. But you should know, I mean, that's your mother." Julia says, "Oh, my mom doesn't tell me anything about that. She says it's her job and that I shouldn't be involved." And Ryan says, "Well, anyway, you want to get some breakfast?" Julia says, "Sure, it's on me." And Ryan says, once I'm working, I'll pay you back. And Julia says, oh, it's no problem. You're new here. Come on, let's go. Back with Hayley. The dead are coming for her. She tries to open up a window, but they're all locked. She then finds an old rusty pipe and breaks it in two. She takes the longer half and uses it as a weapon. She then starts killing one after another, and she's screaming out in anger. But then, we see 3 little children that are reanimated corpses, and they're coming towards her. She starts crying, but this time, she pulls herself together, and she kills all 3 of them before they kill her. We then see her let out a big scream. Lincoln and Dave are walking as they hear a big scream in the distance. They run up the hill to see the mansion. Lincoln hears this and says, that's her. It's gotta be her. And Dave says, you sure? Lincoln says, I know that scream. And Dave says, we can't hit this place alone. So what are we doing? And Lincoln says, we're getting in. That's what we're doing. He pulls out his walkie and says, Lincoln reporting to Kingstonville. Come in. Luke responds and says, I hear you, Lincoln. What's going on? Lincoln asks, you guys still got those explosives? Luke says, yeah. And Lincoln says, all right. You and Roger and some soldiers need to get down to the mansion. It's on Maple Lake Road. You'll find us there. Be here as fast as you can, and be ready. And Luke says, copy that. "30 minutes later. Hayley is just sitting in the room of dead bodies. She won't stop looking at those kids that are laying there, and she says, you were right, Blake. We should have left when we had the chance. And then we see Douglas walking through the halls with his guys, and he's saying, she was tough, that one. But either way we look at it, we'll find out where Mr. West is hiding, and then we'll tell Lindsay, and maybe we'll see the day that we can become sergeants. As long as things don't get out of hand. We then hear an explosion from outside. Douglas says, shit, there it fucking is. We see a big explosion outside of the mansion, killing over 20 vipers in the yard. Hayley hears this and starts to panic. We see Lincoln, Dave, Luke, Roger, and the military killing all of the vipers outside of the mansion. Then they go out back until they find the way in. They enter the mansion. They enter the mansion and they walk through the halls. Lincoln says, me and Luke find Hayley. The rest of you with Dave and Roger. If there's someone in front of you, don't hesitate. You shoot. Ask questions later. And then they split off. Dave and Roger are with the military, and they're walking through the halls, and then Douglas and his men start firing at Dave and the others. Dave nails Douglas in the shoulder, but Douglas gets away. The military then goes after the rest of his men. Lincoln and Luke are walking through the halls until they see blood leaking from under the door. Luke says, we open on 3. 1, 2, 3. They open the door to find dead bodies, and then they find Hayley. Lincoln hugs Hayley and asks her if she's okay, but Hayley says, "I'm not." And Luke says, "They're coming. We need to kill them all." Lincoln says, "No, I gotta get her out of here." We leave. The exit's just down this hall. And Luke says, "All right." He picks up the walkie and says, "Dave, we're ready for go. We found Hayley. Let's get out of here." We then see Lincoln, Luke, Hayley, and they all walk out as they meet up with Dave and the others, and Dave says, "All right, we got what we came for. Let's get the hell out of here." But as they start walking, Douglas and what's left of the Vipers surround Lincoln and the military. We see Douglas walk out and he's covered in blood and he says, "Drop your fucking weapons, Lincoln West." We see Lincoln and the others have no choice but to lower their guns. Lincoln looks angry and Douglas looks over at Hayley and says, "You see, sweetheart? I didn't need answers from you. I'll get them from him." "You've made this hard for me, Mr. West, but I want you to know that I had fun. And now that our home is gone, I guess the only logical thing is to deliver your head to the Queen. Now that sounds like fun to me. Why should we stop the fun? Let the fun continue. Because I win, and Mr. West finally loses." Out of nowhere, the Vipers all get killed. Douglas says, "What the hell?" We then hear someone walks up behind Douglas and says, "Turn around, big guy." Amelia points a gun towards him and says, "Hi, I'm Amelia." And she kills Douglas, and then we see Sydney come out of the woods with a machine gun and says, "Everyone okay?" Sydney then hugs Lincoln, and everyone is now back together. And Lincoln says, "I'm so glad you're back. And who the hell are you?" And Amelia says, "Sorry, I'm Amelia. You must be Lincoln." And Sydney says, I met Amelia on the road. Partly the reason I made it back at all." And Lincoln says, "All right." And Roger says, "Well, let's go home." We see everyone's getting into the military trucks and getting ready to head back, and Lincoln walks over to Hayley and says, "I'm so glad I found you." And Hayley asks, "Where's Blake?" Lincoln looks kinda hesitant and tells her, He's gone." Hayley starts crying and says, "What? Where is he?" Lincoln says, We found him. Lindsay and her Vipers, they murdered Blake last night." And Hayley is crying, and Lincoln holds her and says, "It's okay." And we see him say, "When's it ever gonna stop?" Lincoln then starts crying too. Lincoln then sees Dave, and Lincoln walks up to Dave and says, "Hey, we're all ready to go. You coming?" Dave says, "You asked me before when I came out here. It wasn't because I wanted to kill you. It wasn't Hayley." Lincoln says, "Then what is it?" Dave says, "The Vipers. The Vipers are going to keep killing us. You've seen it. I've seen it. The Viper thing, it all started with me. Maybe if I would have kept my mouth shut in that jail, maybe things would be different." And Lincoln says, "That's the past now. And you can't change the past." And Dave says, "You're right. I can't. But these people have suffered enough, and frankly, I've suffered enough. You go back. You get ready for what comes next." Lincoln says, "Look, whatever this is, I can come with you." Dave says, "No. You have a kid on the way, for God's sake. You've got people in there. You have to hold on to them for as long as you can. You said that. Kingstonville is the future. I know it. Your people, my people, have a future. You go back with them. I got something I gotta do on my own. We then see Lincoln and the rest of the military go back home as Dave goes on his own mission. We see Lincoln and the others get back. Just as they get back home, the guard Derek says, "Where's Dave?" Lincoln says, "He's still out." And Dave looks worried, but then Derek says, "Well, Lincoln, I'm not trying to freak you out here, buddy, but the patrols found something pretty big a few miles out." And Lincoln says, "What is it?" We see Dave walking through the woods, and then we see him look out into the distance to see we reveal he is outside of the Viper City. Vipers surround Dave from every direction. Dave puts his hands up and says, "Hey, I'm a friend. I'm Charlie from the power plant. I've been on the run since last night. Please put your guns down. Please." And the Vipers lower their guns, and we see a huge smile on Dave's face. We see Kezia walking the streets of Kingstonville. She then sees the military preparing for a fight. We see Lindsay walking through the halls, and Delta says, "All the fighters from the outpost are here, Your Grace, just like you asked." Lindsay says, "That's good." We then see a Viper walk up to Lindsay and says, "We found a survivor from the plant. Figured you'd want to see him." Lindsay says, "Send them to my office." And the Viper says, "Sure thing." We see Dave is sitting in Lindsay's office, and he's walking around looking through her stuff when he then sees Chris's head is on her shelf. Dave just stares at it and says, "You know, the more I think about it, this place is way more your style." And then the doors open. Lindsay walks in and says, "Like what you see?" Dave turns around to see Lindsay and says, "Are you kidding? It's beautiful. You can almost just hear that beautiful sound of death." Lindsay says, "I've heard about your hard travels. It must have been tough." And Dave says, "Oh, it was, my queen." Lindsay says, "You know, we get too many new faces around here that I don't even know who's who anymore. What's your name?" Dave says, "My name is Charles Davidson." We see Lincoln driving in a car, and we see from up the hill we see a massive group of deadheads at the bottom of the hill, who are the same ones that we saw in the premiere. Lincoln turns on his walkie and says, "I found them." And Derek says, "All right, it's okay, we can lead them away." And Lincoln says, Yes, we can. We're gonna lead them right where they need to go." Lindsay cuts off his conversation on the walkie and says, Douglas, everyone is gathering together at the city. Where are your people? Did you have to kill some of the outlaws? Lincoln picks up the walkie and says, Nope. Outlaws are living, the Vipers are dead. I'll see you soon, Lindsay.